All right, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also. But again, debate is impossible with scientists. They're incapable of doing any kind of honest interacting regarding the credibility of their religion. And that's all it is, their dogma that you must believe. Anyway, so Paul Nord, the conversation, right, over a month of talking about a simple collision type launching experiment. You're just going to launch one mass off of another mass with a elastic storage device of some kind. And there's been this whole big convoluted argument about, just how good an experiment, what value is this experiment? Because frankly, if you ever actually do the experiments and actually watch what happens, you'll notice that, depending on what you're launching, you get completely different amount of energy out of the device. So it probably is even true for a gun. If you put really light things, really light bullets in a gun, you won't get a total recoil that'll be the same if you put a heavier bullet in. And the same will be true for the bullet. The bullet will have less momentum. Just a fact. So the same explosion, depending on how much mass I put in the gun, how heavy a bullet, I'll get more and more the heavier I go, and less the lighter I go. So anyway, kind of an important fact to be aware of in doing an experiment. So it does go all the way back to the 1700s and the sham de Charolais experiments where she was denting clay, just denting the surface with round objects. They didn't penetrate all the way through. They just dented the surface with the round part. And the physicists of the time couldn't figure out, apparently, that that means the shape of the object is changing based on its velocity. The faster it goes, the more it pushes sideways instead of down, which is a huge advantage one could understand. So it's just garbage science. It's bad physics. It's bad logic, bad reasoning. And they just keep doubling down on it. So I keep trying to get him to the subject. He just won't discuss the actual subject. And he insists that I must agree that his experiment is an idealization. And therefore the results should be ideal. And of course they're not going to be. So even if we were discussing a lever, which I would argue substantially conserves momentum, you do understand that whatever you put in on this side, let's say you drop something here and you're going to launch something here, you're going to lose a little bit to the momentum of the lever. The fact is the lever's moving and you got to pay for that. So there's lots of different ways you can do thought experiments to kind of figure out how, oh yeah, it works one way, but it doesn't work the other way. So let's say I did have a piston that I used to, in between the spring and the launching device, there was a piston. You can understand that, let's say the piston gets hit by an object and is now going to compress the spring. Well, the trick is you don't lose any energy when the piston is compressing the spring, because the piston is going to lose its energy to the spring. It's going to compress the spring. So the momentum you give the piston is for free. You don't lose any of the original energy in. But the going the other way is a real problem, right? So if I have the spring compressed and then I have a piston and then I have the thing I'm launching, obviously now the energy of the piston is still the energy of the piston. It's moving. And so even if you have a stop or you let it shoot out, either way you've lost whatever the momentum of the piston is. That energy isn't going to get into the object. So it's clear, rational, reasonable arguments, and they refuse to engage in any conversation about those rational, reasonable arguments. So, as a thought experiment, I will give you this one. Another way I thought of, because he's doubling down, on all these stupid things he's been saying, but he's using the vector scalar crap now and talking about how, when you throw something at a wall, twice the momentum goes into the wall that you get as a reflection. So whatever reflects, twice as much went into the wall, which is ridiculously stupid. So, yes, leave us do that. So I was thinking in space, Now, as I did their calculations, the idea of a pendulum swinging into an object and how much you're going to get back, you'll get 100% back when you get to a 7 mass. So if you have a 1 mass crashing into a 7 mass, by their mathematics, you're going to get 100% back. The idealization will be 100% back, and it'll just keep going forever, hitting the 7. And the 7 won't move. But they're saying it's going to, the whole pendulum, the whole earth will move. Yeah, it's that stupid. Okay. So let's say you're in space, and you just have 2 objects. All right. 2 very heavy, 7 masses. Okay, we could just say 7 masses. Could be much heavier. And we're just going to inject in between these 2 objects something with momentum. So we just fire a gun with a little pellet in it, and we initiate momentum in this direction. So just imagine there was a gun here, I shot, and then I removed the gun. So now it's just going to go back and forth. Now you could imagine I shot it from an angle and it went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but that doesn't matter. So let's not confuse things unnecessarily. So what they're saying is going to happen. Let's say I gave it 100 momentums. So that's what it starts with. Mass times its velocity is 100. Okay. What they're saying is going to happen is 200. So this is going to hit this surface. 200 is going to go into this object. Now, in this case, they can't say the Earth moved, right? So they usually try to hide it by saying, you hit a brick wall, the brick wall is connected to the Earth, so the whole Earth moved. They say when you walk, you push on the Earth, and the Earth moves as you're walking. They don't think your foot is just reflecting off the Earth. They think you're actually moving the Earth. So in this case, you'd have to concede that the 7 would actually move, because there's no Earth it's connected to, no anything it's connected to. So it would leave with 200 MB, right? And then I would get 100% reflection. So it goes right into the other surface and hits it with 100 and does the same thing. I get 200 momentums here. And it just does this back and forth thing. Okay, so now Steve Mould demonstrated that he could get a glass bead to bounce on a hard surface 256 times. And that was without him understanding that he needs to have a hard surface, not just the flat part has to be hard. See, they use, if you this is done, there's YouTube videos, you can see this. They take an anvil, okay, for example, and they drop a bead on it, and it bounces and bounces quite a few times. And the trick is that the heat-treated one works really well. So if it's hard surface, very flat, undentable, then it bounces a lot. If it's dentable steel, obviously it's losing the energy to denting, so it doesn't bounce as much. So you can understand that if you're going to do the experiment, you need to establish that there is no place you're going to leak the energy. So the trick was he did it inside of a vacuum chamber, and it didn't make much of a difference. It was a 5% difference, not a huge difference. And the trick was, though, is that his vacuum chamber wasn't really on a solid surface. So the whole chamber was wobbling. Then that's where he was losing the energy. So he probably could have got this up to 300 if he had actually put the vacuum bell on a cement block or cement floor or something really rigid. So anyway, the point being is that this is going to go back and forth hundreds of times, and you're going to end up with, let's just say 10 times the momentum here, 10 times the momentum here. So now you have 10 times the momentum going this way, so you have 1,000 momentums. You have 1,000 momentums going this way, and that's their theory, that I can take 100 and turn it into 1,000. And let's understand, I can just use a simple lever to reverse the direction, right? So all this vector crap doesn't mean much, because we know that a lever will just reverse direction, right? I can put something in this way and get the same thing out this way, or I can get something half the mass at twice the velocity, obviously, too. But anyway, if we just did the same mass, it's clearly understood that as long as the lever's light, compared to the mass of the objects, you'll get in what you got out, 80, 5, 9, 95% maybe of the velocity will be retained. The momentum will be retained. So you'll conserve, say, 95% of the momentum and reverse the direction. So I can just reverse one of these directions. And so then I'll have 2,000 momentums going this way. And I started with 100 going that way. 100 in, 2,000 out. That's their theory. They think that actually happens in this physical reality. Our physical universe actually does that kind of nonsense, when obviously it's just that nonsense. That's free energy, it's free motion, it's free mass moving. That's what moves spaceships. That's what you collect in ballistic pendulums. That's what, you can go through all of these experiments where kinetic energy completely fails. So again, I just showed the block experiment, where they collide the 4-mass block into the 1-mass block, going 1/4 the velocity against 1 velocity, and it's a dead even. Even though the fast light block has 4 times the energy, it doesn't win the collision. The collision doesn't move with a thing that has 4 times the energy. I mean, obviously, their physics is garbage. It's rubbish. It's nonsense. It's silly. It's stupid. It's ignorant. It's unevidenced. And I shouldn't have to aggressively make these arguments. I mean, honest people should concede when something doesn't make any sense, and free momentum doesn't make any sense at all. Like I said, the closer I get into, the more I can get this idealization. This could go on for a very long time, where this little object bounces back and forth and continues to keep giving twice the energy to the objects. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea. Obviously, what happens, the more you get back, the more it went into the thing you hit, quite obviously. So if I hit it and it moves, I'm going to lose energy. Okay, I'm not getting back what I threw in. Everybody should know that from baseball or anything else. I throw something and it makes the wall wobble, I'm not going to get as much energy back. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is so stupid. And this is what physics teachers are. This is their religion, and they will not have this dogma disgraced and shown for the stupidity it is. They will not watch the videos. They won't answer the points made. They'll just ignore and keep preaching their nonsense. And what point in this conversation he says, textbooks for 200 years have said. Textbooks for 200 years, for 2,000 years, said there was a thing called the law of the lever, and that levers conserve momentum. And you change that without letting anybody know. Yeah, I'm sure the textbooks are still saying the law of the lever is a thing. You ought to inform them that they're misinformed, that they don't understand the physics. I mean, it's just so ridiculous to have to make these arguments. All right, so anyway, we'll read. It's just, the only thing this does, it just vindicates the point that at every forum I've been kicked out in less than 24 hours because they won't let you argue these points. They won't address the evidence you link them to. They won't pay any attention because it is a religion and they're just fanatics, and that's all there is here. There's no science here. There's no love of the truth. There's no respect for the scientific method. There's no anything but their reputation. They will not admit, ooh, you fooled me. I'm really a sucker. Because it really is. You have to say, you are suckers. They all know that Newton didn't say F equals ma. They all know that the third law somehow doesn't apply to almost every single kinetic energy experiment possible, right? It doesn't apply to rockets. Kinetic energy, there's no equal and opposite reaction in a rocket. There's no equal and opposite reaction in a gun. There's no equal and opposite in terms of the collection in a ballistic pendulum. It never obeys Newton's third law. And yet they'll preach Newtonian mechanics. It just doesn't make any sense at all. They're just such duplicitous hypocrites. They know it doesn't work. They certainly know it doesn't obey the third law. I mean, it's just so obvious it doesn't. I mean, you calculate the kinetic energy of anything you launch from a spaceship. You're in a spaceship. It doesn't matter what you throw out of the spaceship. If you calculate the kinetic energy, you're not going to know anything about how much you're going to move. You have to calculate the momentum to know how much you're going to move. Momentum works. Kinetic energy fails dismally. You will get the same motion out of your spaceship, if you if you put your hand over the end of the gun and the recoiling gun shoots out, or if you use it the other way and shoot the bullet out. Those two things, even though physics says the bullet has 2,000 joules of energy and the recoiling gun only has 2, the fact is both of those things will move your spaceship exactly the same amount. And they do know that. They're not so fucking retarded that they can't admit that simple truth. And they should say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Why am I talking about Newtonian mechanics when something as simple as a cannon or a gun violates it overtly? Why am I pretending that Newton didn't know how cannons work? And that somehow he believed in kinetic energy when clearly he didn't. All right. Okay, so it's just so bad. Yes, so the fact that I have contempt and I'm just so fed up. I mean, it's 10 years of making these arguments, and they just get better and better. And the crickets, so to speak, the non-responsive nonsense just gets thicker and thicker in terms of they can't stay on the subject. They just keep saying something like, with your calculation or some sort of bullshit. And you're just like, this doesn't have to do with anything with the calculation. It's a clear physical argument. You're saying this actually happens. Well, does it happen or doesn't it? It's just so bad. All right. So I'll pause and we'll read some. It just, yeah. Like I say, all I can do is just vindicate the point that these people, you cannot have a rational conversation with them. They refuse to deal with the subjects. Alright, should be back. So, I'll just read the most recent stuff. Anyway, so he says, let's go back to the original problem. It's not the original problem. It started with Mould, Steve Mould's lever video. I compress a spring with a static force equivalent to 9 pounds. Now, why he chose these numbers, I have no idea. I place that spring between two masses, a 2-pound mass and a 5-pound mass. So why they're not 2 to 1 or something, I don't know. On a frictionless surface, the spring is released. What are the velocities of the two masses afterward? So I have repeatedly told him that this is really just going to depend. You're going to get a different answer depending on the circumstance. So clearly it's going to matter how fast and how massive the spring is. All of that's going to matter. So the stiffness of the spring matters. The mass of the spring matters because there's going to be a defect in the experiment. So if I have a cannon and I fire it with no cannonball, there'll be a certain recoil in the cannon. So I'm going to use exactly the same explosive in every one of these experiments. So I showed the video of this, on a platform. And the idea is the less load you shoot, the less recoil you get. Obviously meaning less of the momentum is being put into the objects. Because it's always 50-50, right? The idealization is half the momentum goes one way, half the momentum goes the other way. So obviously in this case, 5/9 of the velocity would go with the 2-pound object, and 2/9 would go with the 5-pound object. Okay. Whatever the total amount of velocity would be, if it was an idealization. But the simple fact is that light mass means the charge is going to lose a lot of its energy trying to push that very fast. And it's still going to be moving fast when that object leaves. And that's the flaw in the spring experiment or rubber band experiment. If you push something directly with an elastic mechanism, it will always fail. So even a cannon, which doesn't seem very elastic, has the same defect. So it's the same for a gun. If I put a heavy bullet in the gun, I'm going to get more recoil. from exactly the same explosive, I'm going to get more recoil because I'm going to lose less of the energy in the process of shooting exhaust. The exhaust is going to be pushing more bullet because it's going to be moving slower as it exits the gun because it's moving a heavier bullet, which is moving slower. So you've obviously slowed the explosive down, and by doing that, absorbed more of its energy. And it's really true with rubber bands. So the whole point is that you could do these experiments where you launch something. See, a spring isn't bouncing when you push something into it, right? The spring isn't oscillating when you push something in. And what's it doing when you push something out? The spring is oscillating. That oscillation is all energy that didn't get into either the recoil or the object. That's the simple truth. And that's the failure. And we're talking about twice the velocity. So we're talking about an oscillating spring oscillating at twice the speed, which is a huge difference in the amount of energy getting into the objects. So he just will not listen to the argument. All right. So I say this isn't the original problem, because the original problem was a lever and his claim that levers don't conserve momentum and they don't obey the law of the lever. And he still holds that, I think, but it's a little vague, as you'll see later. The problem you're not recognizing is the inefficiency with which springs return energy. So I'll go to all this trouble to try to explain it to this idiot, and he won't pay any attention. He won't watch the videos, and he probably doesn't even read this text. Because frankly, an imbecile should be able to figure this out. Okay, a tennis ball, for example, is said to be only 75% efficient. Now, I just read that on a Google. I asked Google, and that's what it said. If it hits a wall with 100 momentums, it comes back with only 75. Because the ball is actually, if you watch one in slow motion, which I have, Steve Mould did a video about reflections, and it actually showed spin, but you could really see how the ball's oscillating. And it's just an amazing amount of energy is in the ball. So you bounce the ball bounces up, and it's still oscillating. So obviously all those oscillations aren't linear motion. The tennis ball, for example, is said to be only 75% efficient. If it hits a wall with 100 momentums, it comes back to only 75. My argument is that the efficiency of springs increases with an increase in mass. So it really doesn't have to do with the total mass. It has to do with how the mass is distributed. So if either side has a very light mass, then you're going to get very little energy out of the spring. And if both sides are fairly heavy, you'll get most of the energy out. For example, if you put 1 pound on 9 pounds of spring compression, you will not get 9-fold increase in velocity. So just pointing out that I can compress a spring with 9 pounds of weight, lock it there, and then try to release 1 pound. And it's not going to go 9 times faster than 9 pounds put in at the 1 mile an hour velocity. It's not going to be doing that because the spring, when it releases, the light object is still going to be moving very fast. So a big pile of its energy, it never got into the object. Okay. As compared to 9 pounds launched by 9 pounds of compression, as conservation of momentum would demand. So I'm pointing out that, yes, if it was an idealization, you should expect certain numbers, but those numbers won't be realized because of this huge defect in the fact that springs collect energy very well, but they don't release it very well unless you keep contact with them. So as long as you're bouncing on a spring and you're always in contact with a spring, then they're very efficient. But as soon as you're releasing objects, all the efficiency is lost. All right, the fact that I wish you would address is my statement that the faster, so I've said this about 4 times to him now, the faster the spring is moving when the object being launched leaves the spring, the more of the spring's energy won't get into the object being pushed. I mean, how can, I've done over and over again. It's a statement about reality. He has to somewhere contradict it and point out how, no, wobbling springs don't mean anything. Because obviously the spring is still moving very fast but doesn't have anything to push on. It can't give the energy to anything because it's moving fast in air. It's just pushing air. All right. Lighter objects collect less momentum from any given spring compression than a heavy object will get from the same compression. So if I want to get all this, the most momentum possible out of a spring, I'm better off using something very heavy than something very light. Described as a paradox, a 50-pound person, I should have said, going 10 miles an hour compresses a spring. Let's say the spring measures 5 units of compression. A 100-pound person going 5 miles an hour, half the velocity, pushes the same spring and registers the same 5 units of compression. So you know that the two objects, a 10-ton train goes into this, 10-ton going 5 and a 5-ton going 10, they're going to compress the spring the same amount. Now, he might disagree with that, but that's the absolute truth. Now, if you compress the spring 5 units and launch 50-pound person, they will only travel 7 miles per hour. So you're not going to get back all of your energy to the 50-pound. But the 100-pounder, you're going to get really close. So momentum in will not equal momentum out. Now, if you launch the 100-pound person, he will end up going maybe 4.9 velocity, very close to the 5. So you lost a lot less. So the heavier the thing is you put in front of the spring, the higher percentage of the spring's absolute energy you are going to collect. I've made the argument to him at least 5 times now, and he just will not pay any attention. All right, so he says, standard physics gives a clear answer using conservation of both momentum and energy. So as I've pointed out before, it's just ridiculous to talk about conserving both. You can't conserve both with levers. You can't conserve both with pulleys. You can't conserve both with a gun. You can't conserve both with anything. It's just absolutely ludicrous to talk about conserving both. It can't happen. They're two different numbers. It's just so pathetic. Anytime you transfer energy from one mass to some different mass, you have to sacrifice one of them. And the clear evidence is the one that's always sacrificed is kinetic energy. And the one that always is conserved is momentum. All right, you say the system gives different amounts of momentum depending on the masses. So tell me, what are the actual predicted velocities? What is your math? So I've repeatedly told him I can't predict how much it's going to affect because I have to know how heavy the spring is. That's how it's part of its momentum, its mass. I have to know how stiff it is because that'll tell you how fast it's capable of going. So those are at least 2 variables. And none of this has been tested. So how the hell can I give you the formula for it when you won't even concede it happens? Your physics hasn't even bothered to do the experiment, so I can't tell for a cannon. How much different is the recoil when you shoot just air out of the cannon and when you shoot a cannonball out of the cannon? What's the difference? Well, if we don't know those numbers, there's no way to calculate it ahead of time. All right. I've given you the general approximation. The phenomenon has never been tested. It may not even follow a linear relationship. I would guess the mass of the spring and the stiffness of the spring would both affect the efficiency of the spring. So I can't give him math for which there's no math. I mean, there's no formula. And then he says no videos. Just an amazing statement, right? So all I've done is I've linked to 2-minute pieces, right? Every video link I gave him his little time codes. Please, just watch 2 minutes of video, and he won't do it. 2 fucking minutes, and he won't watch it. Okay, so anyway, videos of physics lectures are one of the best things on YouTube. I can't imagine anyone interested in science complaining about science videos. I have explained the spring problem in numerous videos, or I've been over and over it for months now. At least 3-4 months since I discovered the problem, frankly. My most recent example, and I give him the time code. I really wish you would tell me how much I have to pay you to make a video debunking the argument being made in my video. How much do I have to pay you to respond to my explanation for how springs, how elastic objects work when they're giving back their energy? That they're not as efficient. They're more efficient collecting than they are giving back. Absolute fact. Okay. I mean, it's just amazing bullshit. So he says no metaphors. I mean, no analogies, no any. So it's like, well, this isn't how you have a logical conversation, retard. Every word is defined by other words. Do you know that, jackass? Go look in a dictionary. You'll see that every word is defined by other words. You have to use words to describe words. Anyway, no ranting about quantum mechanics. I never ranted about it. I just pointed out how it's, all of your physics is crap. Just equations and numbers. No, I'm talking about experiments, and he doesn't want to talk about experiments. So this is a theme throughout this whole conversation is my obsession with experiments, his obsession with abstract formulas that are never tested. I wish you would rant some more on how you don't believe in the law of the lever and think levers don't conserve momentum. So again, I keep taking the shot at him, and he never responds. So he just, and it's clear. He has this moronic notion that somehow levers don't conserve momentum. That somehow the half-mass object will only leave with 0.4 extra velocity, which will not happen. Anyway. So then he responds, if every result you don't like can be blamed on inefficiency, then your model isn't testable. If it's not testable, it's not science. So this is more nonsense about how I'm saying don't test. I'm saying test, but use the lever instead. Use a lever launcher and this whole spring argument goes away. It literally does go away because no matter what mass object I'm launching, the spring will move exactly the same speed. And that will guarantee everything gets the same energy. You're just telling a story, refuse to challenge. This is all garbage. That's fine, but don't pretend it's physics. So again, he completely evades every argument made and just talks shit. All right, so it says, if every result you don't like can be blamed on inefficiency. And ignoring variables is a classic way to deceive. So that's the whole point here, right? Is that all these experiments do have variables, and these liars wish to distort and pervert. They're contriving experiments. They're not doing experiments. Okay. I clearly pointed out that all the inefficiency can be eliminated as a variable by attaching the spring to a lever. You clearly refuse to refix the experiment and wish to deceive. Go ahead, as it proves my point. You aren't really scientists. I mean, it's just so damn obvious. All right. Then your model isn't testable. A physicist who doesn't believe in careful testing is better described as a creationist. Okay, so, I mean, there's just no point. Experiments do require you to apply scrutiny to the experiment and the method. You have to figure out whether there's friction and where there's tension and where there's this and where's that. There's no point. Even, again, the Steve Mould experiment, he seemed to try to eliminate all these variables, but he didn't think about, oh, my vacuum chamber isn't on bricks. It's not on a solid table. If it's not testable, it is testable. You just won't modify the test to isolate out the unwanted variables. And it's that simple. I gave him the complete diagram, how simple he could fix it, and he won't fix it. All right, it's not science. Your inability to respond in any way to the arguments presented proves you're not science. All right, then he says, you're just telling a story you refuse to challenge. The story is an absolute fact. And if you had any integrity, you would tell me how much I have to pay you to refute the story publicly. So I'm begging him to make a public video explaining how I'm wrong. And this coward, this slandering, lying sack of shit, okay, doesn't have the integrity, the balls to do it. All right. He says, that's fine, but don't pretend it's physics. You're a cowardly pretender. That's how bad this is getting. Who won't argue with a single one of the arguments. Just type misleading garbage. Or show me some calculations. Do the experiment incrementally increasing the mass. So yes, take your gun, your launcher, launch a piece of paper, launch some styrofoam, launch this, launch that, and you'll see that the total momentum created in the experiment will keep increasing as the mass increases. Absolute fact. Demonstrating that, yes, obviously with the lighter objects, you're getting less energy out of the launching mechanism. And it'll correlate perfectly to the amount the spring is oscillating. Okay. And then, let's see, do the experiments incrementally, increasing the mass, and then you'll see if there's any calculatable pattern to the loss of momentum. So again, the argument is, who knows? There's probably some formulaic, draw it on a chart pattern, but it might be a parabola, it might be a straight line, who knows? Still no calculations, he says. If your theory only works with a lever and fails otherwise, so he's conceding it works with a lever, even though he doesn't believe levers conserve momentum. So, what sense does this make? If your theory only works with a lever, so he's conceding, I'm not going to do it because, yes, your theory will work. That's why he won't do it with the lever, because he knows it will work. And then he says it's not physics, it's an excuse. So it's just amazing. Do it with a lever and then explain why the lever is cheating. Explain how the lever cheats the experiment. Okay, real theories make predictions. You haven't made a single one. I've perfectly predicted it, right? Did I I pointed out how exactly what's going to happen. I mean, outside of giving you perfect generalities, I mean, again, I can't give you specific answers for something that's never been tested, but I'm giving you pretty close approximations. All right, so he says, still no calculations. What's the calculation that predicts a tennis ball only returning 75% of its momentum? So there's no calculation, right? There's no rocket formula for the tennis ball. There's no tennis ball formula. They'll tell you how much energy you'll lose in the recoil, the bounce of the tennis ball. There's no formula for that. But every rubber ball is going to have a different amount of efficiency in returning its momentum. So what's the story here? So he's asking me for a formula he doesn't have. All right. If your theory only works with a lever and falls apart otherwise, more evidence you don't pay any attention to any arguments made. And quite duplicitous of you to concede it works for levers when you claim levers don't conserve momentum. The theory also works perfectly to explain why ballistic pendulums never, ever conserve any sensible portion of kinetic energy. I recently showed a video of colliding blocks, again perfectly proving no conservation of kinetic energy. So those are the Bruce Yearney video. With those simple wooden blocks, and clearly demonstrating no evidence of kinetic energy. It's not physics' excuse, and you are pathetically dishonest. Okay, real physicists make predictions. Real theories are based on real credible evidence. Why don't you explain to me how the 1700s, when they dented clay with round objects, they were doing good science? So please, if you're going to defend this kinetic energy theory, defend all of the crappy nonsense that took place in its development. And those are just plainly garbage experiments. All right. You haven't made a single one. And you haven't countered a single argument I have made. The fact is, I have told you exactly how your experiment is flawed, and instead of providing some kind of reasoning explaining how rubber bands always produce exactly the same force, all you've done is fart in my direction. All right, so then he replies, you're ranting about tennis balls. So again, it's a rant to bring up the simple fact that tennis balls don't come back with 100% of their momentum. Far short, actually. And clay dents instead of showing a single calculation. So again, I've explained, haven't I, in every way possible. I can't calculate something for which there's no formula. Physics isn't about feelings, which I don't even understand. It's about math and predictions. You still haven't given either. So obviously I found this easy to respond to. You're ranting about tennis balls. And I say, show me the calculation for the tennis ball. It loses 25% of its momentum. Where's your calculation? You're a teacher and you can't do the calculation? What, you don't know any geometry or algebra or anything? Provide the calculation or you're an asshole. So I'm just reversing it and just saying, oh, you can't do physics unless you would give me your calculation for the tennis ball. He doesn't have a calculation. All right. Physics isn't about feelings. Clearly your butt hurt. Okay, it's about math and predictions. No, it's about accurate fucking statements, you fucking cunt. I mean, god damn it. You're either accurate or inaccurate. That's all there is. There's just accuracy. That's all physics is trying to do, is describe accurately reality. And all you people want to do with it is, well, no, it's just for fondling. It doesn't matter. Accuracy doesn't matter. Real breast doesn't matter. I just need something to fondle. Anyway, you can't make any. Levers do obey the law of the lever, and they do conserve momentum. You're an idiot. That's how, it's to that point where, what's the fucking point of this, Mom? This is moronic. You can't type a response to any point made for a fucking month and a half. You still haven't given either. You're an irrational coward who hasn't been near the subject this entire thread. And it's just an absolute fact. Anyone who has the guts to read this crap cannot possibly reasonably conclude anything other than he just invades the subject entirely. All right, so he says, still no equations, then does some crappy math that's really stupid, and blah, blah, blah. So I'll just read my part. Still no equations. And so I write this out again. I've given you the general idealization equation. MV in equals MV out. So your total momentum in will be your total momentum out. So, and the idealization is the spring gives back 100%. And then it's really easy to come up with numbers. But it doesn't happen. So there's no point in doing it because it doesn't happen. Okay. And I've repeatedly pointed out to you that your experiment is far from an idealization. I have repeatedly stated the inefficiency with which elastic propellants give back stored compression has not been tested by your science. As I stated, I have seen maybe a dozen variations of the experiment without exception when you add up the velocity of the objects propelled and the objects recoiled, much less total momentum is produced if one of the objects is very light in weight. So anytime there's a light object involved, you're going to get less energy out of the spring. There's a Steve Mould video where he's demonstrating spin. In his demonstration, you can see that when a ball is bounced off a surface, if it's rubbery, it oscillates a great deal on rebound. So in the slow motion film, you can just see the ball just, oscillating with full of energy. That's not motion. All right. Obviously losing a portion of its rebounding momentum. He also had no equation for the amount of energy lost in that oscillation because it hasn't been tested. All right. Yeah. So this is, if we define a tennis ball's downward direction as positive, the initial momentum is pi equals mv. So duh. After the bounce, its velocity is upward negative and its momentum is 0.75. So again, I gave those numbers 0.75 because that's what Google said. But again, we don't have science here. The different kind of, like a rubber ball versus a handball versus a super ball, they're all going to have different numbers. So again, this is all just sort of bullshit. I mean, it's, again, trying to force it to be a formula, and it's not a formula. There's no standard formula. First off, I'm sure different tennis balls produce a different amount of rebound efficiency. The 0.75 figure is just a general figure gleaned from a Google search. So then he says the change in momentum is P equals PF equals PI equals 0.75 MV minus MV equals 1.75 MV. So he's saying that the wall got, it should be 150 actually. But anyway, 175% increase in the momentum. So 100 goes in and 175 went into the wall. This is his argument. 75 came back and 175 went into the wall. Idiotic. Okay. I would argue that 1.75 is absolute nonsense. There's merely 75 in the ball as linear motion. So the tennis ball comes back with 75 in linear motion, and the other 25 is in the balls oscillating. So it's just like the spring oscillating after shooting something. It's the same thing. The unused energy is in the oscillating spring. And the other 25% is oscillations in the rubber ball. So I think that's just, you can't possibly reasonably attack that statement regarding the reality. that's where the energy is lost to, is the oscillations inside the rubber ball. It's rebounded, it's now oscillating. Those oscillations had to come from something. Well, they came from the linear motion. They've stolen part of the linear motion. Anyway, so he says, that change must be transferred to the Earth. So P Earth equals 1.7. So this is, again, they think the heavy objects that don't move, obviously, move. And that they think they can get 100% of their energy back. So in gravity, that means you can just drop it again. Right? If you're getting 100% back, you can just let it fall again and let it fall again and let it fall again. And they're saying that every time a ball bounces on top of an anvil, or in Steve Mould's case, 256 bounces, it's putting twice the momentum into the anvil. I would say, obviously, you have no evidence the Earth absorbed any energy or momentum. That is silly assumption that the Earth absorbs twice the energy is easily debunked by another Steve Mould video where he bounces a glass bead off a surface 256 times. Clearly, each time the bead bounced, it didn't put twice its momentum into the surface. And again, is this something I should have to argue with adults? Adult humans, this is dumber than Flat Earth, this is dumber than UFO, this is dumber than Sasquatch. I mean, actually think you can increase the momentum by merely just bouncing something on a surface. All right, you can find this exact reasoning in any physics textbook from the last 200 years. I say the last 200 years is a lot of suspect sloppy physics. And that bad science isn't going to be fixed by your kind of closed-minded, textbook-thumping, non-critical thinking bad scientist. And that's all this asshole is. He shouldn't be teaching. He should be, in remedial classroom himself. I assume you're going to argue that momentum can't be negative. Yeah, duh, I'm going to do that. Negative momentum is nothing better than anti-energy. Ridiculous nonsense. Again, how can you people be stupid enough to think that, I hit a cue ball into two balls that are going to go left and right. So I hit it right in between them. I give both of them momentum. Their argument is I didn't do any work. So my cue ball is still going exactly the same speed. So even though it made the two balls move, the cue ball didn't lose any energy because it's no work, because this cancels that. Yeah, they think when a nuclear bomb explodes, it's zero work. Zero momentum is being expelled. Zero work is being done. Because some of the explosion goes this way and some goes that way. So it's all nothing. It's zero. Yeah, ridiculous. Okay. Negative momentum is nothing better than anti-energy. Ridiculous nonsense. Okay. So then he's saying that would just confirm a fundamental misunderstanding of vector quantities and the equations we use to describe them. And I say, I understand those equations don't work for rockets, ballistic pendulums, collisions, rotating masses, levers, pulleys, etc. So I've given all the examples. I've shown the video clips of all these things where it fails dismally to ever be collected, to ever do any work. So they have a statement about how much energy something has, and you cannot make that energy do any work. Absolute fact. I'm not hopeful that the math above will help, but there it is anyway. So again, it's so patronizing and insulting, to pretend that there's some math formula I haven't seen. Okay. What would be helpful is more experimental evidence. And especially the math formula that says the object not moving. The object not moving, that's exactly what Professor Lewin says. The object not moving has twice the momentum. So somehow it has no velocity, yet it has twice the momentum. That's how bad it is. They'll say something that's stupid. Okay, but I've already got all the credible experiments on my side. All right, it says, you clearly have a lot of energy for these conversations, but if you want to participate in real physics, I'd recommend taking a basic math and physics course. I mean, it's just, again, I've already said to him, I've watched hundreds of lectures. Start with algebra and study Newton's laws of actual equations. You might be surprised how much you've misunderstood. God, he's so arrogant. You know, he just needs to be knocked as far down as you can knock somebody down, right? I mean, this is just an example of, you know, when I'm proven right, future, there's no other choice. You have to go piss on this fucker's grave. I mean, there should be some penalty for people being this obnoxiously arrogant when they have nothing to base their crap on. He can't show me a goddamn piece of fur from his Sasquatch. He's claiming this fucking bullshit exists, and he can't show me a single fucking experiment demonstrating it. All right. You clearly have a lot of energy for these conversations. Yes, I think the truth matters a lot. At least you have once again demonstrated no conspiracy required. Just bad science by lazy, arrogant, pontificating dupes. So yes, there's no conspiracy. It's just human beings generally suck. All right? That's why half of them are religious kooks, is because they suck. They're goddamn fucking stupid fairy tale loving jackasses. And the scientists are just the same fucking thing. They just want a new modern god. The wooical. All right, but if you want to participate in real physics, the simulation the simulation I've created is real science, and the theory behind it is real science. Your religion will eventually find its way to the ash heap of history, and you may well be recognized for your role in embarrassing human intelligence. I mean, he's an embarrassment to science, thinking, reason. It's just disgusting, his entire evasion of the physics in this conversation. He doesn't want to talk about the physics. He just wants to talk about his fables, his fabulistic, never get the right answer math. I recommend taking a basic math and physics course, and I recommend you take your head out of your ass. Start with algebra, then Newton's laws and actual equations. I'm applying Newton's actual fucking equations. It's your science that lies about what Newton said. He never wrote F equals ma. You might be surprised how much you misunderstood. Well, at least I understand enough to know what Newton said and didn't say, and what he didn't say was somehow acceleration is a squared function. It happens forever and ever. Not going to happen. With every month, the evidence I compile becomes larger and larger, and your obvious evasions become more and more obvious. So again, he has evaded every single argument made, produced, and he will not argue the experiments. And he won't do the experiment. He'll only do it his way, okay? The way he can cheat. So because I'm calling out the cheat, he's basically saying, well, I can't do my magic trick then. You know, if you're not going to let me, you know, go backstage and shove pigeons up my sleeve, you know, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do the performance, you know, because you're not going to let me cheat. That's all he's saying. Weaselly piece of human garbage. God, I just hate humans. I just hate being on a planet full of jackasses like you people. You're just so fucking stupid. Oh, damn, I don't see these little numbers moving here. Oh, they're moving. Yeah. Phew. Didn't want to have to do that a second time. Alright, anyway, so that's enough of a video now. And so till the next time and such and so forth. But I mean, it's just... I mean, I can't, you know, it's just I'll have to pull out all of the times where I said exactly, you know, not exactly the same thing, but just kept trying to make him understand there's an argument here. Your experiment is not an idealization. And the fact is, he just won't hear those words. Amazing. All right, so till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Just hate the stink of you. Yeah. Jesus. My two favorite movie characters, Mr. Smith and from The Matrix and Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. You people deserve some combination of those two characters. You've earned it. Anyway, till the next time and such.